it's a complex business. It's not about a single channel. It turned out a lot of our transactions had multiple touches. And not all touches are the same. What do you do about free touches? And should free touches trump paid touches? And then we started really just rethinking things altogether and said, well, maybe it's not paid versus free. Is it really about acquisition or is it about navigation? Like a paid click for Expedia, the brand name, well, that's just really a proxy for someone typing expedia.com in the URL. I mean, they're searching for Expedia just to get to my site. That's not somebody I'm acquiring. They were trying to get to me. Well, I mean, what's the difference of SEM brand term, SEO brand term, or just direct type-in? It's kind of all the same. Or how about trigger-based stuff? They come to my site, they do something, I send them an email, and then they come back. Is that an acquisition? Or is it just a time-shifted bit of merchandising that's no different than something that happens on my site? So we started looking at these things. And a brilliant statistician, a scientist that we had on the team, came up with this crazy idea. We were using SAS at the time, and it turned out there was this model built for the pharma industry, for pharmaceuticals, for doing really complex longitudinal studies on drug testing, on effectiveness, and in colloquial terms were called survival models. How do you take a whole bunch of discrete, disparate events over a long period of time and figure out what really is the causality? I probably would have said, let's just do a simple conjoint analysis or something. And I mean, this was a totally different way of approaching the problem. And it worked. It was really interesting. And no one had ever done anything like this before. We put in all of our marketing channels, and we ran them through this giant statistical model. And it spit out stuff that, frankly, vetted common sense. And it turned out, yeah, we were weighting relative channels very wrong. We were undercounting some of our more expensive channels like paid search. We were vastly overcounting some of the channels like email. And when you really looked at how they drove the net result, our math was wrong. And think about the importance of these models, because we were spending hundreds of millions of dollars against a model we believed to be right and wholeheartedly felt that the spend was good, and we just found out, oops, maybe it's not as good as we think it is. And it turns out you'll never get this right. I mean, in fact, Avinash spoke with us earlier and said this is a pointless exercise. I'm proud to say I think I proved him wrong on this one. But you got to come up with better, more accurate models all the time, especially when you're spending real hard money. There's a classic statistical saying that all models are wrong, some models are useful. So we were trying to get a more useful model, and it worked. So there's another 2-for-1 here. 2 lessons that I learned out of this. One, borrow, steal, and plunder from other disciplines, from other industries. A lot of the problems we just keep trying to solve for ourselves in the web space have been solved many times over. Classic media mix modeling, classic marketing ROI, in this case using a model built for pharmaceutical testing for solving web problems. Find smart people, find people who've worked in other industries, talk to them, learn from them. There's a gold mine of opportunity there. And letting our people do that has done some really interesting things. And the other thing is, to do this, we had to pull all the data together. We had to get it all into a single data warehouse. We had to have a single set of definitions in order to run all these models. And it was, frankly, about a 2-year process to get that to happen. It was rather painful. But we did it, we pulled it together, and suddenly we started to have a single source of truth. Suddenly we were able to actually make meaningful, consistent decisions across the organization. And it changes the game. Suddenly then we were actually competing on analytics. We were competing on data, not on politics. Because if you have multiple sources of truth, you can have the illusion of competing on data, because you pick the data you want that gets what I am trying to accomplish. It's really just fancy politics. Got to have that single source of truth. So my next one, big challenges and little packages. So started looking at data more broadly, and this was a couple years ago, and I stumbled on an interesting thing, which is these little mobile devices. They were actually coming to our site, Expedia. It was kind of the advent of the iPhone and a meaningfully good browser and a smartphone. They were coming to the site, and they were buying on our fully leaded, giant, at the time, rather over-bloated site. They were buying. I couldn't believe it, on these little screens. And we didn't have anything. We had nothing to make it easier for mobile. Parts of the page didn't even work in mobile. but here they were coming to our site and transacting, which is a pretty good sign that there's some pent-up demand out there. So I started to earn the right with some of the things we're doing to take some of these things on. And I fought for it, and I said, let me dev this one. I'm going to go run mobile. Out of our analytics organization. We'll become a mini product organization in this little carved out thing. And we got started, and we didn't know what we were doing. But I quickly realized we needed data to figure out that, we knew we didn't know what we didn't know, but we needed some ways to do that. And all the classic techniques, all the classic tools didn't work. In an app, what's a page view? I mean, basic things like visits, sessions, page views, conversions. I don't know what any of that means in an app. So we figured, well, let's just start by instrumenting. And we got Opinion Lab to give us an app version so we could get feedback, and we instrumented things the best we could, and we just literally invented it all. An interesting thing happened in the feedback, which is what we really wanted. We wanted to get that voice of customer, that visibility, is it turns out mobile users were a chatty crowd. This was a couple years ago. And we got 5 times more feedback per, call it session, than we did on the website. This was a passionate group, especially back then. And more importantly, this was unexpected, but they were talking to us. The conversation was with us, not out on, say, like an iTunes store where they're just bashing us publicly. And that was useful if we listened and responded, and that was our responsibility. But an interesting thing, you'll see up here, this actual comment, just updated the app and it didn't carry over my booked itineraries from Expedia. Useless. What happened here? And these are the kinds of things you learn. There's new classes of problems that we were stumbling onto. So our clever engineers had basically come up with an all-new version of the app. We had a pretty big upgrade, and for all intents and purposes, it was all new code. Entirely new code. But it turns out, in iOS, and Android has the same thing, there's a keychain, a global system-wide vault where you can store credentials against apps. So while it was all new code, they thought, well, hey, if anyone had used the prior app and they had actually stored their credentials in the keychain, we won't make them re-log in. We'll just go grab that. There's a reasonable design consideration. But the workflows hadn't been built that way. So you launched the app, and in the new app, we had these helpful getting started screens. And the last page was get started, and it had 2 choices, 2 calls to action: sign in or continue as guest. Now, these were good customers. In fact, they had the prior app, and they had already signed in. So their natural inclination, given those only 2 choices, was to sign in. So they clicked to sign in. They saw their username and password there. And the only action button on the screen, other than more go back, which really didn't make any intuitive sense, was sign out. And they did. All of them. And suddenly all their itineraries were gone, and all their information was gone, and they had no idea what happened. And the app didn't have any real stateful view of, are you logged in or not? And we were trying to be helpful. We made it worse for our best customers. But we got the feedback, we got the data, we were looking at things differently, and we quickly, a few days later, launched an update to the app where this one said, hey, when you get to that last step, make it context sensitive. If they were already logged in, instead of giving them that choice, it just said, hey, look, you're still logged in, let's sync your itineraries now, sync my stuff. Problem went away. So lesson here, and this is true of all new channels, social, you name it, the analytics in mobile, they're just totally different than web analytics. It's so easy to try to delude ourselves to think, it's the same. But the success metrics are different. I mean, think about an app. Someone comes to a website, it's especially if you're a commerce site, it's pretty direct response. They come to the website, they either buy or they don't buy. People download apps aspirationally. When we launched, we later got mobile right. I ran an acquisition of a company called Mobiata, one of the best travel app manufacturers out there. Just amazing company, and we launched this really phenomenal app called Expedia Hotels. It's great. And we got comments, I love this app. I can't wait for my first trip to use it. Well, traditional conversion metrics don't account for that. Here's a happy, good customer who's actually installed the app on their phone, carrying it with them everywhere, that hasn't yet resulted in a conversion. What's the math there? What's the right KPI? It's different, and we're all figuring this out. And social has the same class of problems. And while we're talking about mobile being different, there's all sorts of different use cases. So no, this does not mean it's time to take an intermission. How many of you knew from an actual recent study that 39% of people use their smartphones here? Know your customer. So finally, my last story, get your hands off the product. We took on mobile, we started to actually drive a lot of change on the site, and we were realizing, hey, there's something here, we gotta have more data-driven decisioning around product management, and we started to literally take over the store. And one of the areas that was just right for us was checkout. And we took it. We said, okay, just all those engineers now roll up to our responsibility, and we'll manage product management of checkout, as well as a bunch of other areas of the store. And we started to have fun. And I'm just going to show you where we just using hard data and analysis and testing, just the breadth of what happens when you put this stuff in the hand of analysts that actually have the right to get something done. So we looked at the checkout process, and first thing we saw is, hey, when you actually clicked, it's a little small, but click the Book Now button, we then dumped you out to sort of an upsell page. How about buying some ancillary services or some in-market stuff, a cruise, a restaurant, or whatever. And we said, let's just get rid of that. Let's just push them directly to the first page of checkout. I mean, they clicked the Book Now button. Let's let them book now. We looked at checkout flow stuff. So borrowing from some best practices we saw everywhere, as soon as you got in checkout, we deleted the header. It's just gone. You're in the checkout flow. If you want to go back out, you can, but let's not distract them with any other buttons with any other choices. Let's get it focused. We put a progress bar in place that we never really meaningfully had. Where are you in the checkout process? How many steps are left? We, on every single page of the checkout, put a trip summary on the side, your shopping basket. What is it I'm buying and how much does it cost? We did integrated login. So this was crazy. We used to have this thing where you started the checkout process, and the very first question we asked you was, do you want to continue as a guest, or do you want to create an account or log in? I don't know, I just want to book my gosh darn travel. You're asking me to decide now if I want to get married to you with an account? I don't even know if I like you yet. I haven't seen the process. I haven't had my trip. But I have to choose now? And that was the only time you could ever choose. If you said, I want to book as guest, you were a guest. It was a non-attached account. It wasn't ever part of an account, and you were done with the process. Even if you loved us, there was no upgrade. It was a binary decision early in the process, and you were done. And of course, most people just wanting to get their transaction done, even people who booked a lot with us, just went the guest option, because there wasn't a clear value proposition to choose anything differently. So we said, let's change all that, and we said, hey, let's just go into the checkout process. Now, we did say, already a member, you can log in, or continue. Pretty reasonable. And in the process, we put an integrated thing that said, hey, and this was on the last page of checkout, with all the information we have, if you want to create an account, all you need to do is put a password in. We already had their email, we already had their address, we already had everything we needed, and it was literally just one extra step. Your choice, put a password in or not, and we put it at the end of the process. And of course, it helped conversion, and we got a lot more people registering. It was the right place to put it, and we got rid of a barrier at the beginning of the process. And we got to just collecting the information we needed. I mean, you know, most American flights today don't serve meals at all, but we were still asking for things like, do you want a vegetarian platter? That'd be great, actually, thank you very much. But I'm pretty sure they only serve peanuts. You know, why are we asking for this information? So we went through and looked at what is all the stuff that just isn't important at this point to get the transaction done, and we got rid of all of it. If you were booking multiple rooms, we actually used to make you say, okay, I need a guest name and full guest information for every single room. And we looked around and no one else was doing this. Why were we? So we said, okay, we'll just ask for one and it'll flow through all the rooms. If you want, we put options where you could expand it and put a second name in if you wanted. But I don't know, I got another room for my kids. Do I really need to go through the whole process for them? I'm paying for it. It's my room. It's connected to my room. So we made that much easier, and same with things like special requests. Hide the things that aren't needed for the happy flows, but put them in there if you needed them. It's a lot of stuff we were doing. Coupon codes was a disaster. We put it in the right place. We made it easier to find. We played a lot with, do you really heavy up that you can put a coupon in, at which point people go out to the web and start searching for coupons? Or do you just put it obvious enough that if they have one, they'll find it? And played with that. We did things like auto-selecting credit card type. It turned out if you put the wrong credit card type in, and it was amazing how often people just left the default, it created an error condition. This isn't a Visa, you silly, foolish customer. Why'd you say it was? So we just fixed it. If they put in a number, it turns out you can actually calculate these things from the number, and we said if they put it in, and then we put the choice below the credit card, we tested this, because they put the number in first, and poof, we actually filled it out for them. We made it easier, we made it right. And then things like addresses. Common US mistake. You mean the entire world doesn't have an address formatted the way we do with US zip codes? And we made it context aware. This was all done globally. See the Denmark site here. So that things like an address was context aware. Do they have postal codes? Don't they? What's the standard local practice for what order they put the fields in and so forth? And all that stuff just became standard templates to make it locally appropriate. We gave constant feedback. In line, rather than waiting for you to hit the submit button and then telling you did something wrong, if there were required fields, if there are things you missed, have it dynamically as you're going through, communicate with the customer. Same with passwords. Is it enough characters? Does it have the right number of, alphanumerics and so forth? Put that feedback in as you're going through, in line, context sensitive, so you don't have to keep going through multiple submits. This is all the stuff we preach about, and we got to do it. The legal stuff, the rules and regulations and all that stuff. We made it fixed size, no matter how big or small, and which we tried to make it as small as possible, was there if you wanted it. And then at the top of it, we actually did a bunch of text work so that the things that really did matter, can you cancel it or not, float up to the top in fairly simple highlighted part. Before the book, you actually checked out in really big bold number. We made sure above the complete the booking button, you saw a big price, just that reassurance of what am I about to do. And then even things that lawyers like but really don't matter, things like implied consent. Do I actually have to click the box that says, yes, I agree to these entire rules that I never really read anyway? I obviously agree to them. I'm trying to book with you. I think giving you my money is consent. And it turns out in most countries in the world, that's good enough. So get rid of the checkbox, get rid of friction, get rid of these things. And we were doing all this, we were testing it all. So we put this all together, and our conversion went up 7%. It works. Put product in the hands of the people who know what they're doing, and good things happen. It's a great success, a great story. And this was just one of our paths just in the hotel, and we're now doing similar analyses in our air path, in our package path, activities, cars, all of it. It's a playbook that works, and it's all driven from true analytical observation in the hands of product managers. So my final lesson, don't just count, don't just measure, it's not about the data, do something! Make decisions. Make mistakes, it's okay. If you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. That's our job. It's not about counting, it's not about getting the data, it's about getting shit done. That's what we need to be doing, which is my final lesson. So, an interesting thing that happened, we started to look at how we'd evolved. We'd centralized all this, we pulled it all together, and it had grown. And it was incomplete. It had grown given the bounds of the organizational structure, but there was more we could do. And we realized to evolve this, there were really three separate things, and we started to carve up the organization a bit. We realized there are analysts, which is really an operations function, and we were building a good, strong corporate operations function, and we said, that's where the analysts, this is the voice of truth operationally across all aspects of business, and way beyond web analytics, customer analytics, and financial, and market analysis, and marketing analysis, and so forth. And let's put it all together. Let's get all of the smart BI and analysts together. And it's an operations function. Those are the consumers of the data. And then there was sort of a product management layer of the tools and the platforms and the analysis. And that was becoming big. We had a lot of integrated products and tools we had, and managing that was becoming increasingly integrated into the site operations. We realized that belongs in product management. It was actually a centralized team for all of them, but it needs to be part of product. Let's not have the battle of every time we launch something new, they forget about what we need to do to measure things. I mean, it needs to be integrated part of product and managed as product, both from what we need to integrate and for the consumers, our analysts. And then there was the platform infrastructure. I mean, there's an increasing number of systems and servers, and in T-Leaf alone, we have over 90 servers now. I mean, there's a huge amount of infrastructure and just IT management, which really belonged at the core of engineering. It was part of what we do as part of the fabric of the site. And we started to split things up. And it was interesting. So, cut off a little, sorry, but in my story, since I joined T-Leaf, 12 years and, believe it or not, 17 bosses later, this evolution of analytics, this drive drove a change in my world, and it created for me a bittersweet rite of passage. I passed the baton on analytics, it wasn't mine anymore, and handed it to some able people that had been built up on my team. And I started a new narrative of my own. And with that, I say thank you very much.